In this video, I'm going to explain how to remove and repaint the centre console on the Porsche 996. I'll also be extending the wires for the heated seat switches and moving them into the centre console. The first step in removing the centre console is to remove the gear lever gaiter. This is held in with 4 clips. Pull the gaiter upwards to release the clips. With the gaiter removed out the way, you'll see this screw at the front of the console. Remove this screw. If your gear lever is held in place with a hex bolt, you can undo that and remove the gear lever at this point. You don't have to remove the gear lever, it just makes it slightly easier to remove the centre console if you do. Open the ashtray and pull upwards on the lid to remove it. Undo the 2 screws underneath the ashtray and then you'll be able to pull out the switch panel. Remove the connectors from the back of the switches. Underneath the switch panel are some more screws. Remove those. Next we need to remove the side panel for the handbrake lever. This pulls outwards at the top as shown in the photograph and then lifts upwards from the bottom. Open the centre compartment lid and remove the rubber mat at the bottom of the centre console. Underneath the mat you'll see a screw. Remove this screw and remove the plastic tray. Underneath the plastic tray you'll see another screw. Remove that. You'll then need to remove the coin holder. This is clipped in place with a small plastic clip. This photograph shows a view looking upwards inside the centre console where you can see the clip. It's possible to reach in through this hole and release the clip with your finger. Once you remove the coin holder, you can remove the screw from underneath it, and at that point you'll be able to lift the centre console out. The switches for the heated seats were originally in front of the centre console, but I want to move them into the centre console, so I need to extend the wires. Before cutting the wires they were marked up, each one with either a 1 or a 2, so that I know which connector they go to. The wires are then cut in a staggered pattern so that all the joints won't be overlapping, and then extension wires were soldered on. Before soldering them, solid mechanical joints were made by twisting the wires together, and then heat shrink tubing was applied over the wires. This shows all the joints for one of the switches. Once the extension wires were fitted, they were all wrapped up in tape loom. The wires were left slightly longer than needed to enable them to feed through properly. It's easier to lose a bit of extra wire than it is to have them pulled tight. The wires were fitted underneath the carpet. To do this I had to lift up the shift mechanism. This is held in place by 4 nuts, so just undo the 4 nuts, then lift the mechanism out of the way. I then passed a thick wire underneath the carpet. The new wires were taped onto this and then the wire pulled back through. In this photograph you can see the thick blue and white guide wire which was used. The ends of the wires were then soldered onto the main loom, again with staggered joints and heat shrink, and then more loom tape was used to tape them up, and then the wires were pulled back into position. Moving on to dismantling the centre console. Remove all the leather panels from the side of the console just by pulling them off from their clips. The lock can then be removed by undoing the 3 screws which hold it in place, as shown in this photograph. With the lid of the centre console open, remove all of the small screws in there and then slide the cover forwards to release it. You can then remove the 2 screws which hold the lid in place. You'll also see in this photograph the 2 screws which hold the piece of metal in place for the check strap. This can also be done to remove the check strap and the spring. The centre console consists of 2 parts which are held together by 4 screws. There are 2 screws each side and 2 screws inside. This photograph shows the 2 screws on the side which need to be removed, and this one looking upwards from the bottom shows the 2 screws inside at the top. With these 4 screws removed, the 2 parts of the centre console can then be detached. The switches can be removed from the switch panel from behind by using a small screwdriver to lever the clips out. The ashtray lid is removed from the ashtray by pulling the sides out gently, being careful not to lose the spring. Once all the parts have been removed, they're all ready for cleaning. As you can see in this photograph, there are actually 4 parts which are going to be painted. These are the main console, the ashtray lid, the side cover for the handbrake lever, and the switch panel. These parts were all washed and then rubbed down with 200 grit wet and dry to remove the textured surface from them. These parts were then painted with 2 coats of plastic primer. You can also see in this photograph a 5th part, which is an extra plastic cover piece which is available when adding the GT3 centre console. After the plastic primer has cured, These were all rubbed down with 800 grit wet and dry, and then 3 coats of top coat were applied. The top coat was then flattened with 800 grit wet and dry, and then 3 coats of lacquer were applied. The lacquer wasn't rubbed down when it was finished. It would have been possible to polish it, but the finish was good enough. And here you can see the finished painted parts. When the lacquer has been left for a few days to thoroughly set, the parts can be reassembled, and then the unit can be put back in the car. Reassembling the car is just the opposite of taking it out.